such a morbid imagination. I must take after my mum.
The difference is, I can control it. You can't.
Just a quick message in the beginning. The audio quality on my end sadly isn't on par with our regular standards. This will be fixed in the next episode, but in the meantime, I hope you still enjoy. I'm George.
I'm Devyn, and this is the 11th episode of Medicinema.
In today's episode, we're going to talk about two movies relating to and using stop motion. Because there weren't any big news dropped on us since the last recording, we are actually going to directly go to the first movie, that is Stop Motion.
Stop Motion is the feature film debut by writer-director Robert Morgan, and it follows the life of Ella, a struggling stop-motion artist who would love to do her own creative work, but always ends up being just the animator for someone else's vision. First, that vision being of her overbearing mother until she falls sick. Later, she meets a young neighbor in her apartment complex and starts creating with her, or more accurately, for her. Her mind becomes more and more fragile as even her stop-motion puppets seem to develop a life of their own. So, how'd you feel about this one? I know you're a big fan of actual stop motion.
I am conflicted, is the best way to put it. There's a lot that I admire here. As you already pointed out, I'm a big fan of stop motion. I'm a big fan of everything practical done in camera. I am very much in the belief that it is the way to go if you want to make anything that should last and should, stand the test of time, really. I am also definitely not opposed to meta storytelling, the work of Charlie Kaufman with stuff like the adaptation. But both of those things I felt like didn't really serve that much of a purpose here. Like, this is really not a bad movie in any way. It just is so unspecial.
Interesting. So I actually really enjoyed this. This gives me Silent Hill vibes in the right ways. There's a lot of really interesting motifs happening here, and even some really cool symbolism, I think. It's a deeper cut movie than it needs to be. I also really like over-the-top going insane stories. A lot of people like The Lighthouse is watching two guys going crazy together, right? This is a really great, to me, example of a person going crazy and you watching why. A note from right off the top of the movie, literally the first scene, I was already kind of entranced in this, you see the main character and you have this lighting on her that's flashing between red and green and stuff. The lighting is so stark that she's making a face and changing her face as she's going, but she's not changing for each color. She's just moving as her face. But those colors are so stark and the lighting is so different that it looks like it's two people. And the movie is just right off the top telling you that this woman is fracturing. This woman is literally on the brink of splitting apart as people, and she is not, you know what I mean?
I fully agree. I like the idea behind that. I also like on a visual side, due to that flickering light, there is this kind of
almost stop motion effect.
Almost a stop motion effect, where you have those individual frames that pop up and you lack the kind of transitional animation in between those. I like all of that. I just thought the hints towards the splitting personality or fracturing mind or whatever were just so on the nose. I instantly I expected something like this from the opening shot, basically. And from the moment the mother is sitting in the background in the very next scene and she is blurry and her voice is distorted and stuff like that, I already felt like I knew where this movie was going. And that was kind of the disappointing thing about it, because I couldn't even point out as to what the problem was, why my mind instantly went there, why it, it felt so predictable to me, because it's not like it's bad. You know, again, it's not
No,
like
yeah. Picking up real quick just from what you're saying about like the predictability, right? So I think, at least for me, horror is a genre built on homage. Horror loves to tell the same story over and over again, just different, or who can tell it the best. There is something primal, I think, about that kind of film, in the way that storytellers of old times would tell the same stories for years, but each storyteller had their own way of telling it, and you would, want to hear a different person tell that story and how their rendition of that story would be. And like, that's kind of how oral tradition works.
Mhm.
There's something really interesting and primal about horror movies still kind of doing that. So predictability in a horror movie for me is one of those things that I kind of go, yeah, that's par for the course of the genre. That's what we're doing here. It is great when something, reinvents something or does something new. It's fantastic, of course. But the journey that you're taking is what's important to me in this type of movie and horror. And I really liked the way that they portray this story of somebody fragmenting and stuff like that. I liked that a lot. You're talking about the mom being like blurry. I didn't notice that, but I was under the assumption, that the mom is the fracture. I don't think she was the fracture at all. You meet the little girl, right? From the moment she first came into her house, like the first time she comes inside, I was like, oh, she's not real. There's no way that little girl is real.
Mhm.
She knew exactly where the meat was in the house, walked past the like sister, the in-law or whatever, the boyfriend's sister, like she didn't exist. There was no acknowledgement. She just instantly like, there's no way. And so I think that she is the woman's repressed creativity. The mom is real. The mom really makes her puppet, really does that to her, and is behind her, and she's got damaged hands. She can't make things anymore. This woman has repressed her creativity for her entire life, and it is a bubble that has burst, and she cannot control that. And so that girl is her literal personification of her creativity.
Yeah, I also took it as that.
Yeah.
I think there could still be an argument be made about the mother character being kind of the more serious, more business, more technical side of things. Like maybe she's the personification of the values she got taught by her mentor figure or something like that, and how her creative drive and her technical, I need to be precise or whatever, how they kind of clash. That's a little bit how I took it. But yeah, I was also, by the end of it, I wasn't sure about the mother character. I just thought that in the way it presented itself, even if the mother might have been a red herring and wasn't meant as a fractured part of the mind,
Yeah.
it instantly evoked that kind of emotion. And so, yeah, as you said, once the girl came around, I
instantly,
moment one, you know.
Instantly know. You instantly know. I like that the movie respects that you're smart enough for that, and it knows that it's playing that up front, and it doesn't waste time trying to tell you later. You just accept it as the fact that happens. Everybody knows what's happening. We're going to keep going. I think that's smart, streamlined storytelling in this sense. It doesn't bog down with that exposition ever, which is a big problem in horror. There's a lot of exposition in horror.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm not sure I still felt there were some unnecessary lines in there. Like there's 20 minutes in, she visits her mother in the hospital, and she talks about the little girl, and she says the line, "She doesn't seem real." And I was like, come on. I already know.
That is true. That is true. They do that one line. You're right. You're right. You're right.
So
okay.
they
I
do
forgot
stuff
about
like that.
I did forget about that line. Just looking at my notes real quick. I think the most unrealistic thing about this movie is that there are that many young, like, attractive stop motion animators in one place at one time. And not only that,
Yeah, I also wrote that down.
not only that, but like this musician, not only his sister is one, but he's also dating one. And he didn't meet them at the same place. He met them, he met her separately, like, that's just what
Even beyond that, like even beyond that, that's a group of friends that are all into making horror themed stop motion, and they are making a living off that. You know,
Right.
that's like, there has to be, like, on the whole scale of the film industry all around the world, there's probably like 5 people that where those words, that sentence applies to.
Yeah.
And all of them are in frame at that moment. You know, they are all just a little friends group.
That's so funny. That's so funny.
Mm.
Absolutely. Also just took me out of the movie for a minute.
Yeah, I could accept that. I was like, yeah, I want that friend group.
Oh, yeah. I bet you were like, yes. Sign me up. Speaking on the stop motion and stuff itself,
Mhm.
before we go more scene by scene of the movie or anything like that, I really loved the felt stop motion of the Mother's style of movie, right?
Mhm.
I get what they're doing, but I kind of hated it first, the like her version, you know? I really didn't like the like, you know, clay,
The wax.
the wax, yeah, the mortician wax design and stuff. I'm like, I don't know if you've ever listened to Tool before, but Tool videos are always stop motion, and they're by a really famous stop motion artist who studied under Phil Tippett, and it's very much in his style,
okay.
and like, you know, they're very strange. A lot of this feels like a Tool video, and that's kind of cool. I really appreciated that after a while. I got used to the style or whatever, but man, I really wanted to see more of that felt work style. It was really smooth and really good. How did you feel about the actual stop motion work? Because, you know, you're much more versed in it than I am.
The technical side of all of that is fantastic. The stop motion animation is great, and there's definitely, like, there's no denying that. My problem more so with that is that I often feel like the same people that are incredibly talented when it comes to stop motion animation
Mhm.
are often not the people who either get funding for movies, like that's a bigger problem as a whole, but also they often seem like they are not the greatest storytellers. It's this kind of ironic thing about this movie where, on a meta level, you could say that this movie even addresses that. You know, she as a character, the protagonist, really doesn't have that much creative drive or that great of a story to tell herself, and part of her journey is relying on the creative minds of others. But I don't know if it really did that much with that.
That's interesting. Okay, see, I also kind of took an idea of like, you know, her not being great at the writing process of this, right? And her being only technical.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes from what the mother said at one point, which she didn't. The mother didn't say. The mother's in a fucking coma. She's tripping.
Mm-hmm.
She's, you know, she's
Yeah.
hallucinating essentially. But the mother herself, you know, she said to herself or whatever. Anyways, that I can control my creativity. You
Mhm.
can't. You can't control it. And so what that took me on was this idea that she's trying to find the story. She's trying to control herself. She's trying to hone in on it and not just fucking make random crap. And that's kind of what she's doing, right?
Mhm.
And as she's trying to go each day, it's becoming more and more spiraled, and the story is getting messier and messier. But as that's happening, more and more experimental things are happening. It's kind of like her creativity is on a pottery wheel, and it's just spinning faster and faster and faster. And it's starting to like fling everywhere and get crazier and more sporadic and less structure. And that's like literally her creativity right there.
Mhm.
So I kind of feel like that. I kind of feel like that's on purpose, that her storytelling falls apart.
Yeah, and I think so too. I agree with you. I'm not sure why it doesn't fully work for me, because I'm usually for that stuff. But here I feel like the storytelling side of it, just like on an actual level, for me falls apart. So just that the fact that the character also tells a story that falls apart doesn't all of a sudden save that for me, you know? I don't know how to.
Well, because they're one and the same. The story of the movie is the story she's trying to tell. That's what we're living through. You know, we're not living on the outside of this like the sister and the boyfriend are, you know.
Yeah.
So of course the narrative falls apart, right? Because her world is falling apart. The entire thing's falling apart. I don't know. I kind of appreciated it, but again, this is why to me I say it's like Silent Hill-ish, because that's kind of a big thing in Silent Hill. So is the like fractured personalities coming to life and having to battle your own fractured personality and shit like that.
Just to add on to that, like there's similar cases like this in history where are you aware of Jim Henson? The dude.
I know of Jim Henson. Yes, very well. I don't know him going crazy though.
No, not like him going crazy, but there was also that situation where, you know, he at a certain point got all the money and all of the possibilities, and he wanted to go with his puppetry, with his art form that he was technically incredibly skilled and revolutionary, really, in.
Yeah.
And he wanted to take that to another level and make like actual movies for adults and go beyond the childlike reputation that puppets have. And he made stuff like Labyrinth in 1986.
Dark Crystal.
And Dark Crystal, yeah. And the big problem with those definitely isn't the set design, definitely isn't the puppetry. That's all fantastic, but the story is just kind of okay, you know? And that's a shame, because just imagine something like Labyrinth, but the story was a 10 out of 10. That could have potentially, like, all of the focus was there in Hollywood in that moment. It had the momentum. If that story was insanely good, then who knows how film history could have went differently. If it was like a hit success like Toy Story, you know, if Toy Story had a bad reputation, had a bad story, didn't succeed at the box office, who knows if we would be in the 3D animated world that we are today. If Labyrinth, on the other hand, had an incredible story and was a big success, then who knows? Studios might have taken the lesson of, oh, apparently people love puppetry. We got to do more adult puppetry movies, you know? I think stuff could have gone down differently. And this kind of feels like another one of those moments where I really wish this was an amazing story and an amazing film, because I really want this art form to succeed. But on just like the storytelling side, it has so many problems.
First off,
Mm-hmm.
Dark Crystal has an amazing story. I don't know what you're talking about. anyways, moving past that, because I really love the Dark Crystal. He passed pretty short after Dark Crystal came out, if I'm not mistaken. I could be totally wrong. I should probably check that. He did pass away, and it took a long time for the Jim Henson Studios even to really get a lot of people that skilled again. They kind of sidelined everybody to Sesame Street and to, you know, all the Sesame Street-esque shows they do.
Yeah.
They eventually did get the shot of doing this again with the Dark Crystal television series, which has amazing writing. I do love the original Dark Crystal. I'm going to make the joke that it has a great story. But no, if you've not watched the Dark Crystal live action show or whatever, you got to. It's amazing. The storyline is amazing. They canceled it because it's too expensive. It was too expensive to create all the sets and hire that many people to work the sets and do everything. And it wasn't cost efficient for Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly wonder if, even if Jim Henson had continued making things and it really blown up better, if just via, you know, investors wanting to make cheaper films, we wouldn't have still ended up with 3D stuff.
Yeah, but you see, the Toy Story wasn't cheap for a movie at the time.
But it wasn't the only thing doing that at the time, though. That's the thing. A lot of people really forget that, like, Toy Story is like the first major animated film, right, that went in 3D or whatever to theaters and stuff, right? But Reboot, the television series, had been doing about the same level of 3D for like 4 years already before that came out. It's like one of the main reasons why Toy Story got to have its big push within the studios was because they could see how well Reboot was doing. and they knew that somebody was going to jump on this if they didn't. So I think it's one of those signs of like convergent evolution. Yes, Toy Story was the thing that set it off. Yes, Pixar was in the right place at the right time and all that stuff, right? But if it wouldn't have been Pixar, some other company would have done it eventually. I think it's an inevitability.
Yeah, for sure. And in some sort of fashion, for sure. I just, I want to imagine a world where Jim Henson was the greatest writer of all time and he just created this big movement of puppetry filmmaking. That would have been awesome.
He could have. He should. I mean, yeah. Like I said, I think, honestly, really watch the Dark Crystal show. It's really good.
Will do.
This, I can see why you would want this from this movie, from stop motion, because you don't get a lot of stop motion stuff. I bet they felt like that with Mad God too a bit.
I still haven't gotten to that one, but I heard that it's like the same thing with not having a story. There's also Chunkhead, which was another big like passion project stop motion dark movie that released like 1 year ago or something, and it's like 2 hours long, and he worked on it for 20 years, and I wish it was good, but I heard it's not.
It seems to be the case with these stop motion things.
Yeah, it's a shame because there is so much love and so much passion clearly in everything they do there. It very much makes a point about how time consuming and how much effort goes into something like that. And it's just a shame that it's for so little purpose, or that all of that time just went into nowhere, kind of.
Well, I think, this movie didn't do bad, though. From what I understand, this movie's done fairly well, especially within the horror community. There's still room for this to, maybe make stop motion a little bigger, I think, personally. Because there's some really cool stop motion stuff happening in this movie. There's a scene later in the film where there's like a full-sized character in stop motion that she deals with, and that is so cool looking. Holy shit.
There's also some lines that they mention towards that. Don't you want to have your own voice? I don't have my own voice. Is a line of dialogue being said 20 minutes into the movie. And man, I kind of agree. There's so many little things where I just feel like these people specifically should know better, outside of the stop motion itself, which obviously fantastic, great technical achievement. But there's other aspects to this movie where I feel like particularly these people should be excited to jump on the opportunity to do something practical, and where there are a lot of possibilities to do that, and they just don't.
What do you mean? Wait, what do you mean?
I'll give examples. There's all those sequences where she's kind of tripping out, where everything gets blurry, it's kind of overlapping with itself. The audio is muffled and echoey and stuff like that. I get from a story perspective what they are trying to do there. It makes sense at those moments when they do it. I just feel like there's so much missed opportunity to do something special there. You can evoke that kind of trippy emotion through so many different practical means. You can work with prisms, shining lights into the lens, giving weird specific lens flares. You can work in a way how Brandon Cronenberg did it on Possessor, where they had a big high quality projector and reprojected and refilmed the footage over and over again, and layered stuff like, they just took colorful gels in their hands and waved that in front of both the camera or the projector. Due to that, you had a lot of practical in-camera artifacts and distortions and stuff like that. I'm not saying do the exact same thing, but I'm saying is there's so many ways with how you can achieve that kind of effect in a practical manner, and that of all the people in the world, of all the filmmakers in the world, particularly the stop motion crowd, with their obvious love and determination to practical, should be the first ones to jump on that. But here I feel like it's mostly digital effects slapped on top of it, and not really like in any creative new way either. Like, it's so just serviceable and such a missed opportunity.
Well, I think okay, whenever the digital stuff is used later in the film, when there's much more predominant stop motion work happening at the same time, I think the marriage is really well done, honestly. I don't think it's over egregious when you have like there's clearly moments where a stop motion figure is the size of, a palm, but they've made it 3 feet tall or something, right? I don't think it's too bad or egregious.
I don't have a problem with that, yeah.
I think there's something to be said about before her creativity explodes and before she loses control, you have those digital effects. But as the movie travels on, it relies much less on those effects. And it kind of could even like be a part of her transition. You know what I mean? I will say though that I actually wrote down in my notes that I liked that effect of the one you're talking about. I actually really liked that. The first time you hear that muted camera's kind of like blurred a little bit, or the first time that happens is when her mom first goes into a coma. If you've ever been in any kind of situation even similar to that, where you have just suffered like a huge life-changing amount of news, right? That's a great representation of that moment, of just the only thing you hear is the sound of your own ears and like the blood in your ears. You can't really focus on everything, but everything is too bright at the same time. I actually thought that effect captured that feeling really, really, really well. Despite, it could have been practical. You're not wrong. But I appreciated it.
Yeah, I appreciate what they are going for. I appreciate the idea and the representation of her feeling that way and how they try to emulate that visually. I just feel like there's so many more other ways to evoke the exact same feeling, and all of them would have been more interesting in my mind.
There are other little things in this movie that I really like, though. Jumping ahead a little bit in the story, she gets the advice to do drugs.
Yeah, that's my next note, actually. Yeah.
She finally breaks down and does it, right? I love the fact that her creativity is now wearing face paint when she's on drugs. It's such a simple, tiny thing that is nothing. It's face paint. It's not even really that much of an effect that carries a lot of weight. Because, again, we know what's happening. It's on the nose, right? We are all aware that this is just literally her muse. It's her creativity come to life. So it's fun to see it be played with in that way.
Yeah, I liked that face paint side of things. Again, I felt like the visual representation of the drugs was super lackluster.
It was terrible.
And uninspired. Like the extent to which they wanted to portray she's on drugs was literally, we're playing, I don't know, Indian-inspired electronic music in the background.
Flashing lights.
The light is pulsating. Yeah. That's it. And we're shooting in slow motion.
Well, but see, that's the thing. That's the thing is I took the face paint is that is the neat way of showing she's on drugs. It wasn't doing it via like, that was garbage, the basic, whoa type drug effect they did. But the neat thing was putting the face paint on the fucking on the creativity. That is the artsy thing to me there. So I kind of made up for it.
Yeah,
because a lot of movies, I mean, that's the other thing is very few movies get it right. Come on.
But I'm just thinking from the perspective of they don't get it right because they don't think that kind of stuff is the detail to worry about. It's often like, yeah, we'll fix that in post. We'll think of some sort of cool effect, and then you add on like a bad 2D effect and call it a day. I value stuff like stop motion because it has to be all planned out, because there is so much thought in each and every moment, because you have to. There's no way around it. So that's why I'm particularly frustrated with that kind of we'll just figure it out later on mentality in a movie by people who are literally known for having the foresight, having to plan everything, having to have the time and put in the effort to actually pull it off practically. Those are literally the people where I expect, I don't know.
I mean, yeah. Hey man, it's a good first step, okay, in your journey of getting stop motion to be the new animation standard.
That's the dream.
Yeah. So it's a good first step, okay?
It's just ironic finding then quotes like, I started my own film, except it isn't really, it's someone else's again. I somehow can only do what someone is telling me. And having lines like that in a movie where it kind of feels like that is, I don't know, didn't vibe too well with me.
That's fair. You know what really bothered me in this movie more than anything?
What is it?
She takes a shower in this brick shower, and it's just this raw fucking brick with like holes in it and stuff. And there is no way that you are keeping like mildew and just like gross crap from. That has got to be a nasty shower, dude. You cannot you cannot clean all that porous rock like that.
Nah.
My God,
You're right.
what a disgusting design. No, but I did write that down as a note that really bothered me. Which is just my next note. That's the next thing that happens in the movie after she does the drugs, is she goes and takes her shower at the boyfriend's house.
As a result of the writing, I don't, at a certain point, I should really care for the protagonist for me to be able to be scared for her or something like that, to really feel for her. And I really don't care that much for the protagonist. Like, there were sequences towards the end of the movie where it actually gets bloody, where she cuts open her leg and stuff like that.
I love that.
And I was just looking at it, and from a really technical side of things, like, my brain was all right hemisphere at that moment where I was looking at it and I was like, yeah, that's well done. I love that shot. And then at the next moment I realized, but I kind of don't care. I kind of don't feel for her. It's not really impacting me in any visceral way. Like, I've seen worse things in film, I guess. So it wasn't like just from a pure, oh, that's disgusting or something like that. It didn't impact me. I didn't, as an emotional connection to the character, feel for her as in, oh no, she's falling apart. Please, someone make her stop or anything. I just looked at it from a very analytical side of things and could admire the effects being done because they are well done. And that's kind of the limit as to how much I could relate to it. And that's a shame.
I think of it as like a, when like cars crash on ice when they only like are traveling like literally really slow, like they have the brakes on and they just start to kind of slowly slide down a hill and they just like dink into other cars. It's not like a big accident, nobody's hurt. It's just like, and there it's going.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about this, is that I'd never felt emotionally attached to this character in any way either. I never cared for her and like was like, oh no, she's fucking falling apart. Like you said, never. But I did sit back, pop some popcorn and go, let's see where she goes though. Let's see some of this crazy shit she's gonna do. Might be kind of entertaining. No emotional connection to the character. I don't know many movies where you really watch the person go insane and you really care about them. Like this kind of insane, killing your neighbors and doing all that. Usually it's just watching this person break in some crazy way.
I know what you mean, but like with the ones that I really love, like you already pointed out The Lighthouse. I'm a big fan of The Lighthouse. With The Lighthouse, as an example, there I'm also maybe not completely emotionally involved with the two of them, but the presentation is so unique and so refreshing, with every other frame being like a frame I haven't really seen in that way before, that there's still other things besides the, oh, we're going crazy now, happening that really drag my attention, that really, keep me engaged with it all. And it's not just the, oh, this is a technically well done effect. There's also other additional sides of entertainment to me, and that could be emotional involvement, that could be fantastic imagery, that could be, some sort of creative decision that makes me excited. I don't know.
There's a good movie here. Not a great movie. I won't disagree. I'm a special effects guy. That's a big thing for me in horror, so it gets a lot of points for me, I think, just when they are doing the special effects being so cool and so interesting.
Yeah.
Some of the imagery is terrifying looking. I love like you said, cutting open the leg.
Mm-hmm.
The thing, spits up the weird seed and makes her swallow it. Fucking brilliant. I took that as like forcing the idea into her, She won't listen to her creativity anymore, so it's literally forcing the seed into her and the seed will sprout or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
The leg scene specifically, what I really liked about that was it would have been really easy for this movie because of how skilled their stop motion and I'm assuming other effects artists here are. It would have been really easy to make that really, really gory, cutting like undoing the stitches and pulling out the thing in her leg, right, the tendon or the nerve or whatever. That could have been really easy to make super gory, but it isn't. It's actually a fairly small wound. It's only like 4 or 5 stitches. Her reaction to it is so much more realistic of what somebody like digging into a small wound would be. We always see in movies, people deal with these really giant wounds in movies and they just, and they do it or whatever, right? That was one of the most realistic, like, I'm going to do something terrible to myself scenes I've seen in a really long time, honestly. Her screams and her grunts and was honestly very appropriate for that small of a thing.
Yeah, I liked her performance in that. I liked the way she looks at her friends when they enter the apartment and are terrified by what's unfolding.
It's such a crazy scene. Holy shit.
Love how she looks at them at that moment. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good scene, for sure.
I think audibly was like, "Oh snap, Becky, you've been caught." This is so stupid.
I really like the general idea, or one of the general ideas this is going for, of she is kind of slowly killing herself for the arts.
Yeah.
How you can look at that in a less literal sense, and how the pressure she puts herself through as an artist is really the one thing that's slowly destroying herself, because she's not giving herself the breaks or the leeway or the, something to...
Doesn't know how to control the creativity.
To cope. Yeah. I really liked how they played with that. That worked out well.
I love on the nose stuff, so I really love the on the nose putting yourself into your art and quite literally cutting parts of her body out to put in her artwork.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Which also, applies on this meta level with the director being a stop motion artist who did finally get his chance to do his own thing. So he put himself into it and, he's the protagonist in a way. No, not that, but, okay. The protagonist definitely represents him. He is a stop motion artist. This is his first feature film, so this is his first time he gets a shot at doing something like that. And he probably, the story probably doesn't come from nowhere. He probably does have,
I was about to say,
almost every artist imposter syndrome and have, the feeling of, is the things that I want to tell, is it worthy? Is it, all of that.
Her killing the 2 people was kind of crazy. The killing the sister character, there's a horror movie. We rate kills. We talk about kills. The pushing into the throat with the tripod was a little weird. Like she pulls out a piece of throat or something. Like it's like that tripod's got a stake at like a spike at the bottom or something. Like that was kind of not my thing. But I will say the dude, the boyfriend, who's lying at the bottom of the stairs, traumatic brain injury, bleeding out of his ear, traumatic brain injury. Just the really gentle, like, pinching the nose and holding the mouth. Man, that's terrifying. Thinking about that from his perspective, your brain's not firing correctly. You don't even know where you are really at this moment. You don't know who you are at this moment. And then suddenly, like, you can't breathe anymore. And that's it. I like that. That was fucked up. That got me a little bit. That's one of those really, like, not gory kills that hit for some reason.
It probably is the best, like, kill in this. I like the way it is even established, We have early on that scene where he's snoring in bed and she holds his nose to wake him up.
That's good. Good call, sir. Oh, that's a good callback. Damn, that's good. Yeah, I would say, storytelling isn't always the best in horror movies to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And horror movies have a penchant for being kind of dumb fun. And while this might not have all the best storytelling, it isn't a dumb movie. This movie's pretty smart. It does a lot of things really smart. And then my final note just being that last Ashman monster that's like 6 feet tall that like she like hides in the other room and it like busts in with her or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's nightmare fuel. That was good. I haven't seen like I love good creature design, and that is creepy, man.
Yeah. I hope this is successful. I hope this dude gets another chance at creating a feature film, and this won't be like another, I don't know, Mary and Max situation where they try to make one stop motion movie, it flops, and they go bankrupt.
It's getting mostly positive reviews on Letterboxd. It's climbing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hope this won't be the last thing we see of this person. I just wish, it almost feels like sometimes writers don't look at stop motion as one of the possible venues for the stories they could tell, because it is so inaccessible, because there are so few people who do that well, and because of the funding and stuff like that.
I'm gonna imagine it's really expensive and takes a long time.
So I feel like rarely is ever anything written by an actual writer that could be done in that way. I just wish, maybe there's like some young writer who's a really big fan of stop motion, and he just ends up being like they team up with someone like the director of this, and we could get actually well-written stuff that is stop motion and is, not made for kids, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I dream. I have dreams. The Wolf House is a 2018 released international co-production stop-motion film and the directorial debut of Cristobal Leon and Joaquin Cosina. It uses a variety of animation styles and techniques to tell the very surreal story of Maria. Maria, who ran away from her village, lives with 2 little pigs in a lonely house that she raises to be her children. They slowly grow into human children as the ever-changing house and the difficulty of survival makes them turn on each other. Devyn, I didn't really prepare you a lot for this one. I kind of threw you into the deep end of the pool to this very artsy and avant-garde movie. How was your experience with this?
I ironically have the exact same problem with this movie that you have with stop motion.
Interesting.
This is the kind of artsy that I like. This is literally artistically artsy. There is so much art, physically, paintings and visual style in this film. It's not just, vibe-wise artsy. This is massively impressive on a technical level. The fact that it took as long as it did makes sense. Anybody who's painted anything in a house knows how difficult it is. And it's just mind-boggling. Despite not having what I would say is really a great story, the visuals just take you along. You could just watch it for so long because it's so impressive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to hear, what kind of deeper subtext there is to this. But to me, that's exactly what it was. What you just said. It's just a lady that raises some pigs. They grow up. They fight. They turn into people. It's a fairy tale. It's interesting. But it is not the star of this movie. The star of this movie is what you're seeing on screen.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the movie also is somewhat self-aware about the fact that the technical side, the artistry behind all of this, is the star of this movie.
Yeah.
I don't know if you read up anything about this movie.
Not at all. Not a bit.
Okay. Yeah, there's some great things to be told here. This movie was shot in all over the world, basically, in small teams of animation artists.
It's not in one place?
No. It's not in one place. I think all of the transitions are whenever it zooms onto a picture, a painting, and then it cuts back out. is when we change locations every time, I think. I'm pretty sure. So it was like separated into smaller parts that individual teams could manage to complete, and therefore, the project was actually doable. They didn't just build like little sets for the artists to work in anywhere. They specifically built those sets within museums and within exhibitions. For the duration of the filming of this film, all around the world, in big museums, there were these sets of this movie with the artists working, and that was an exhibition piece on its own. Like the stop motion process, the making of this film was considered like a living piece of art that you could watch.
That's interesting.
So they very much were proud of the process, of the creative work going into this. And I think it also is represented within the style of the film. There's a lot of not hiding imperfections here going on here. There's all of those with the animations on the walls, with the paintings. You can see where the painting used to be. It's like semi painted over, that it works for the effect, but they are not trying to hide how it is achieved. They are very much drawing attention to how it is achieved. When the things change on the walls, you hear scribbling sounds of,
You can see all the drips on the floor, everything, all the, yeah.
Exactly, the drips on the floor. When the paper mache puppets move, you hear crumbling paper sound effects. It very much draws attention to how it is done, how it is made. The puppets are often like supported with literal tape just sticking to the wall. And
there's a direct scene where she raises her hand off of her blue dress, and you can see underneath for a purposeful amount of frames that it remains unpainted where her hand just was, and then it fills in with paint.
Exactly.
The creative process is the process you're seeing in the film. It is, you're living through the creation. I get the artistic symbolism of doing that as you're actually filming it and letting people be part of it and stuff. It's kind of it makes a good circle.
Mm-hmm.
It is definitely, I spent a lot of time calling myself an artist, and I grew up in a town with like 200 art galleries. I don't know. Either way, I grew up with a lot of artists and beatniky types and stuff, and just that is such an artist-ass thing to do. My God, so much extra work just to be extra. I get it, but it makes me laugh.
I haven't seen pictures of the actual sets and how they looked in a museum or something, but if they have enough space to walk around and not like, squeeze in between.
But I mean to set up simultaneously that many exhibits that will allow your thing to do all the paperwork to get that going, to get the legwork to make that happen. That's a lot of extra work. Maybe not the actual doing the job there.
That for sure.
Yeah, but getting it to happen, yeah, for sure, a lot of extra work.
For sure, the paperwork, the bureaucracy behind it, I can absolutely see that. But I kind of think that's part of the genius here, because that for sure helped them to fund this movie. What's sense. A better publicity, better marketing than being part of an active exhibition? And you could potentially, people who went to those galleries, they could return a few months later and they would see a different kind of set. They would see different puppets. They would see a different part of the film. So
it's very cool. I like it. It's just such an artistic thing.
For sure.
It works really well. I will also say, normally for me, story is king. Plot is the end. I love plot. I love story. That's where I really live in movies. Spot motion not having that great a plot aside too, this movie has way less of a plot than stop motion does. But I totally, I was in the assumption that a team did this in one house or something, right? Even that, I would understand with the amount of technical work this movie took. You don't want to create too complex of a story. It would have made everything even harder. It's like the first time you try a new art technique, you don't do you might be doing a better or more a fantastic technique or something, but you don't try it on an overly complex piece because you're trying to balance that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that they didn't focus that hard on story and that the story is very loose.
Yeah, because just speaking of a technical side of things, this is like one of a kind of a film. Like I've
100%.
never seen anything like it. I don't think there's anything even remotely close to the visual style and visual storytelling than what this movie attempted and pulled off, in my opinion.
I literally showed every member of my family. I was like, "Holy shit, you guys! Look at this! I've never seen anything like this in my life."
I know, right? It's incredible.
It is. It's really, really, really cool. I would see this at an art gallery playing on a screen, you know, and like photos of the time when they were filming it or were making it, you know, stuff like that around. This is an art gallery film. As far as like a film to watch and enjoy, man, this shit's boring. Honestly, I did enjoy it. Like I said, I really did enjoy this movie, but it could have been a little shorter. This is a little over an hour. It's like 70 minutes, I think, or whatever. I could have done 40 minutes. There's a lot of focusing in between big, like you said, transitions, I'm assuming, right? Big motions of art on the walls, big motions of animation, right? And then it calms down and then you kind of focus on the wall that's blank for like 30, 40 seconds or whatever, and it moves on. There's a couple of those times where I think could have been a little less drawn out and it would have tightened the movie up maybe a little bit. But what an experience.
To me, the more subtle decisions in the presentation help with the tone, and to me it isn't boring because I'm kind of mesmerized. It's almost like this meditative experience. The directors, in order to coordinate all of these shoots happening simultaneously all around the world on several different continents, they made a kind of rule book that every team had to stick to get a cohesive look, to get a cohesive experience out of this.
That's common in animation, yeah. Being what's called on model.
Yeah, exactly. Here, this kind of rule book went beyond just the animation and included stuff like the camera is not allowed to be still for 2 frames. So like the camera always had to move even just a slight bit, like forward, backwards, zoom in or like zoom out. Something had to change from one frame to the other. And what that results in is this ever-present slight shakiness to the imagery, where everything seems unstable. And I will get to the story side of things, why I think that is a very appropriate use, but also just from an audio-visual experience, that is such an interesting approach that I've never seen quite like that before, that really adds to the tonality, to the vibe of the film, that kept me entertained.
I think on a technical level, it is a requirement, honestly. If you were to freeze the movie at any point on a solid piece, like you said, and stay for more than 2 frames without moving, right? You would lose the illusion of animation and it would just feel like a static frame. I think the constant motion is required to still feel like stop motion. Because this isn't filmed, right? This is literally just stop motion photography
all the way through,
moving through a 3D space. Yeah. So yeah, freezing I think, you know, they say that's like when you are animating a stop motion character, you need to make every piece of it move while it moves, because if it's like arm doesn't move while everything else moves, it throws everything off because it's suddenly static. You got to make sure everything is moving. And I think the same thing goes for when you're apparently creating a camera angle out of stop motion.
Yeah, for sure, because the camera definitely is part of this animation. It is part of the art form. It is part of the thing they are drawing attention to with the shifting perspective, with the camera shake, with stuff like that. For sure. So yeah, it's just lovely to see that it's part of the consideration. You know, they really thought about those kind of details.
Yeah. So interesting when you think about it like this. Once you take stop motion, a 3D animation, right? You take 3-dimensional objects and make them move, right? once you take that and you create a 2D stop motion painting, right? It's just animation at that point. That's how animation works. You're just taking pictures of pictures, right? So how do you create this more stop motion effect? You do it in a whole fucking 3D space. You make that canvas 3D. And that's such an interesting, almost mathematical way of looking at filmmaking.
Even within that, there's paintings that are, all of those perspective 3D paintings that people do on the streets and stuff like that. They kind of do that here in at least few scenes where the face is drawn into the corner, and kind of therefore the way they drew it perspectively accurate, it kind of pops out of the room and it becomes again something in 3D space despite being 2D animation.
I mean, it happens actually a lot where they're using the dimensions of the walls to create the dimensions of the characters or the dimensions of the world. Specifically, when the pigs are still little and they're playing with the ball, the ball's on the floor and the pig's on the wall, and it puts its head down under where the floor would be to snoop under the ball, and it leans down and it goes along the actual edge, and it creates this visual sense of 3D space, which is 3D space, which is what's mind-blowing, is it is using the actual 3D space. Yeah, it's technically really genius. It's artistically very genius.
I'll add on one more point before I go into a little bit of the story side of things.
Yeah.
I love how they even go beyond that at a certain point, where it's not just paintings painted on the wall in a kind of 3D fashion, or sculptures being three-dimensional in the room, but they do kind of this in-between where their face will be painted on the wall, but the hands are 3D sculptures coming out of the wall into the room or something like that. I adore those shots. That's my God, that's so beautiful.
There's one that's like really complex where the face is painted, like a painted hand is holding a real dress, and then a giant like cutout hand is stroking a dress, or it's a hair or something, the baby or something. I forget what it's doing, but you have 3 sets of mediums all working in a perspective shift, and it's like perfect aligns. The false attachments are perfect. It's a very impressive shot. All of it is impressive.
There's even one more kind of artistic way they did that 3D, 2D kind of thing. There's that scene, I think it's in the same room, in the same scene that you already mentioned, the little pigs and playing with the ball. She kind of walks into the room, and they did that by having a giant plexiglass sheet in front of the camera on which they animated her to be standing there she as a 2D figurine standing there within the actual 3D space, just because they are shooting through a plexiglass. Or I assume it's plexiglass. It might be real glass, but for logistics, I would do it with plexiglass.
Yeah, it's probably plexiglass. But then, the big elephant in the room here is the story. Is very simplistic, kind of fairy tale-esque, with reason, like I said. But I would love to hear these deeper meanings on this that I did not pick up.
Yeah. When I watched this the first time around, I knew that there has to be more to it, and I had my theories as to what it was, and I was somewhat close. Did you have any idea of what else there could be to this story?
No, not really, because honestly, to me, this was just it was just a weird fairy tale. It wasn't anything. It just was what it was. I don't even know. Yeah, I didn't see it for anything else than it just being woman is hiding from wolf outside, finds some pigs inside, raises pigs, they grow hands, they become people. They fucking fight over each other, and maybe it's an allegory for having children. I'm not sure.
The specific individual thoughts I have on details like the growing pigs and what that could mean, but on a more broad scale, this is inspired by a real cult. There's a reason why this movie is partially in German.
Okay, wait. Is this going to explain the really fucking weird opening that seems to have nothing to do with the rest of the movie?
It's part of it, yeah, for sure.
Okay, good.
This is based on a cult started by a former Nazi that fled Germany after World War II and went to Chile and started the cult Colonia Dingadat. It's a German village, cult village. They started there somewhere in Chile. Most atrocious things going on there in the cult, as it turns out later on when they dug up, documents and the history of that place and what happened there. I'm not going to go into too many details on that exactly. She, Maria, basically is someone who fled that cult. The wolf she keeps talking about and the voice we hear is supposed to be Paul Schaefer, the cult leader. And all of the paranoia, all of the I'm not sure if I'm safe here is really representative of her constant paranoia of the cult finding her again, or her, there's so much doctrination, so much manipulation going on within cults that manipulation drives her back to the cult, despite her knowing that there's horrible things going on and she doesn't really want to go back, but it's in her mind, like the doctrination already is in her mind. There are visual references to several of those things. So as you already pointed out at the beginning, they actually, like that cult, financed themselves a lot through selling honey. I don't think they made ads per se, but it's supposed to be like an ad for the business of theirs. He also mentions stuff like within that opening monologue, he mentions stuff like, yeah, and our bad image is only created by ignorant people. Don't think of that, stuff like that.
Yeah. So, I was like, is this film supposed to show us why they're not bad? And then I was like, what does this have to do with anything that just happened in the beginning of this fucking movie? I appreciate this. This is interesting to know. I feel like there is almost zero way for the average user to extrapolate that from this movie.
After my first watch, I was absolutely confused, for sure. I knew, I had the feeling that something more is going on, and why, just the story on its own wouldn't justify the sinister, the dark vibes of it. It's very much filmed like a horror film, really. But the story itself, you could have told that in a more positive light, the same kind of fairy tale-esque story. So I knew that something else is going on here. And the one theory I had was definitely that it has some sort of cult relation with her talking about the bad wolf, with her being afraid that he finds her, with the wolf trying to lure her back in. There's lines like, do you want me to take care of you? So I definitely had the feeling that something more is going on here, and I got the feeling that it might be cult related. But that to me was absolutely enough to include in the movie, because the very first thing I did after watching this film was Googling what the fuck was going on here. And, instantly when you Google this movie, you will come across that cult of Paul Schaefer. In a weird roundabout avant-garde way, it did exactly what it aimed for, at least from my personal experience, because it did teach me about that. I did follow up on that.
That's fair.
Yeah, it's modern art approach of telling story.
I will lightly laugh at the idea that Germans would tell a fairy tale in a lighter way. They're very known for telling fairy tales in dark ways. It's like, part of the whole bag, right?
I actually have a note that kind of points in the opposite direction. So that's interesting. Because to me, it's kind of genius to tell this all like a fairy tale, because it kind of points back to Germany with the Brothers Grimm. Really, they got famous for collecting all of those folklore fairy tales and kind of changing them to a way where they could be told as bedtime stories to kids. They originally...
But aren't the German versions very dark?
Maybe, like, the original folklore versions were very dark, but the book that they collected, the Brothers Grimm, were the lighthearted versions that you know now. Like, they kind of did all of that censoring, as far as I understand the history on that.
That's interesting because as an American, the perspective is the American English versions are the toned down ones, and that the original Brothers Grimm books are the darker ones.
Yeah, maybe they were still darker than what we know now. I'm not sure on the nuances, but I know that, what they did basically was collect those stories and make them accessible to the wider audiences, basically.
What's your opinion on? I'm gonna butcher this. Der Struwwelpeter?
Struwwelpeter. I don't know what do you mean. What's my opinion on that?
Isn't that like one of the darkest fairy tale things like written?
Yeah, for sure. no doubt about it.
Are you surprised I know about that?
No, I'd have assumed it's like pretty well known, like every other.
Absolutely not. Completely off 90% of people's radars here.
Interesting. To turn back to it. So this makes sense to me that a story that hidden underneath the childlike storytelling, there's these darker things going on. It also has the direct connection through the Brothers Grimm to Germany. On a more meta level, Paul Schrader had this dark past of being literal Nazi soldier before coming to Chile and starting this cult. And the story as a whole tells a kind of fairy tale, whilst underneath the surface, there's the dark reality of the cult it is all based on. So I think the decision of turning it into a dark fairy tale is kind of fantastic.
Give me 1 moment. Let me see if I have any what I wrote down for notes, because I didn't write down a lot of notes for this one. It's not a big note-taken movie, to be honest.
It is once you, I didn't know all of this on the first watch around, but having that knowledge in mind, it was a very different experience watching it again.
Oh, I imagine, yeah.
There's more direct visual references to this Nazi connection. At the very first time, the first room unfolds, kind of. So we enter this room and it's a blank room, and then the paintings start to appear on the wall and the room is forming in front of us out of nowhere. The first window that is drawn starts off in the shape of, like, the lines appear in the shape of a swastika before it turns into a full window.
I saw that and I kind of was like, that's not a German thing, right? And I just ignored it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely...
It's on purpose. Okay, yeah.
It's on purpose. There's this idea of what I think is a representation of her mind still being tormented by all of the manipulation of the cult, is to me represented in the way she handles the kids and how she kind of continues the manipulation the cult did to her, knowingly or unknowingly, I'm not sure. But there's those scenes where she talks about, you need to be strong and beautiful and pretty, and I'm gonna make you that. And then she gives them the honey that we know is literally the honey of the cult that we see in the very beginning. And from the brown hair, brown-eyed, they turn into blonde hair, blue-eyed, right after she says, you need to become pretty, you need to become beautiful and tall. And, it's straight up Aryan imagery, straight up what Hitler envisioned.
Yeah, I didn't catch any of that.
Despite, physically getting out, she couldn't get out of her head, those values, those things she aims for.
Yeah, that puts a lot of different perspective on this movie. Yeah, why'd you let me go in blind? What the hell? No, it was a good blind watch, to be honest.
Now you have a reason to return to it one day. Oh.
No, for real though, honestly. Yeah, I mean, this is visually alone, this is a movie worth showing people.
For sure.
Just to see something you've never seen before. A lot of people ask for that in a movie. I want to see, something original, something new. Well, this is it. This is something you've never fucking seen this before.
For sure.
Ever.
I can go a bit also into how I think the presentation plays into that. So I already pointed out the camera shake early on. To me, that's very much her emotional unrest, her constant unease about, will they find me? Am I really safe here? Her unstable emotional state is represented through the unstable camera shaking through the scene at all times.
Interesting.
The colors of the dark rooms are pretty obvious, the negative emotions bubbling underneath.
I thought that was just a technical thing, because dark paint covers other paint.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that probably too, but yeah, it definitely works from an emotional side. All of those eye imageries on the walls probably make way more sense if you have that in mind, that she feels watched, that constant upbringing of being under the surveillance of the cult is very much represented through the big eyes staring at her from the wall.
One of the first times you really interact with the pigs, it comes in as a giant eye through the doorway.
Mm-hmm. The wolf that we hear in the voiceover frequently calls her his little bird. And later on in the film, we have that scene where we see a little bird being trapped in a cage as he speaks about Maria. So that's very much a representation of her being stuck in a closed off environment. In that same sequence with that bird cage, there's also that scene with the candles kind of teleporting and appearing out of nowhere on the floor and burning down within a very short amount of time, because it's obviously all stop motion and it takes forever. That to me is representative of the cult looking for her. In that moment, we hear him talk about looking for Maria. He says something like, "Where are you, Maria? Take a rest, Maria." And what we see image-wise is this kind of light sweeping across the room, across the floor, almost like a spotlight searching for someone, like, a helicopter spotlight searching the floor, but just put into a small scale in this room that everything takes place in. There's a later scene with a candle when they have that dining sequence where she eats with the kids, and it's all lit by one candle in the middle, and you just see it burn through the whole candle within like 2 seconds, and then there's a new candle there. It's again one of those instances where, on a technical side, in movies, there's this big problem lighting scenes with candles of continuity, because you can only shoot for like 30 seconds or something, and then the candle will be visibly smaller if you cut back to another take where that same candle is standing there. So movies where they actually shoot with candlelights, there's a prop person that probably did nothing all day but cut candles to the exact same
That's funny.
length, and they switch out to a new candle every time so it burns at the same height. And here they very purposefully put the candle in the middle to make the opposite and make it so hyper visible how much time is being spent there. It's an interesting imagery to look at. Like, I think it looks super funny just seeing the candle burn out so quickly. But it also is, without screaming at you, like no one's saying anything about it, but it makes it super visible to the average viewer of how much time went into just this one scene. And with so much of this movie being about making the artistry visible, that just makes perfect sense all around.
I can't think of any other movies really that do that too, just the idea of making the artistry really visible.
Yeah, it's at least not to that extent, no. I don't have that much more specifically on the movie. I guess I have one story that is kind of like true crime. People might know of this story, and just so that they have something to connect this actual cult to. Because one super bizarre, weird crime case happened in, like, many crimes were committed in this cult, but I don't want to go into the details because it's unnecessary. But one is so bizarre that I just wanted to talk about it. The kids in that cult village, at a certain point, got a hold of the story of Santa Claus and of celebrating Christmas. And they all loved the idea of this man flying around and delivering gifts to children. And they also wanted to celebrate Christmas and see Santa Claus,
As kids do.
Paul Schaefer obviously didn't like that a lot, that the children who should all worship him were starting to worship this other, even though fictional, but still other person. So he organized another cult member to be dressed up as Santa Claus And this village was set on a riverside. And he had that person arrive by boat, dressed up as Santa Claus, coming down the river, addressing the children. The children were celebrating. Everyone was happy. And then Paul Schaefer took out his gun and shot Santa Claus.
Oh my God.
Yes. Actually shot him. Like, that cult member didn't survive that. Total sacrifice for the point he was trying to make.
Wow.
Yeah, he shot it in front of the children and kind of told them, Santa Claus is dead now. You have no one to worship anymore left. And God killed him because you worshipped someone else.
Wow.
Yeah, that's Paul Schaefer, and that's the wolf. that's tormenting the house. That's tormenting Maria, and yeah, that's all the horror this was really based on. And I know that within true crime circles, that story of the cult leader shooting Santa Claus is kind of a known story. So some listeners right now were like, "Oh my God, that's that cult." So
that's crazy. I didn't even know about that. That's cool. That's a cool connection in general. Just wow.
Yeah, it's so bizarre and so specific, so hyper violent, with even the sacrifice of someone who obviously worshipped him a lot. He wouldn't just agree to do this for Paul Schaefer if he didn't fully believe in Paul Schaefer, and he just, without any regards for just sacrificed him for the point he was trying to make.
About Santa.
Yeah. Literally killed off Santa.
He didn't have an ego problem, not at all.
No, definitely.
A well-adjusted individual. Oh my God.
Yeah. A well-adjusted former Nazi turned cult leader individual.
I will say, to round it off, before, not knowing anything about this, filling in all these blanks makes a lot of sense and stuff. Starting the movie and it being like, the Germans from Chile was not on my bingo list of things I thought I would hear in movies this year.
Yep. That's a one of a kind.
Yeah.
You won't experience that too often.
But the experience is damn worth it, dude. This is a good experience movie.
Yeah. Since both of us aren't super excited for any of the upcoming releases, for the next appointment, we decided on a themed double feature instead.
We will be visited from outer space next time, with your first film prescription being District 9. The 2009 Neil Blomkamp movie uses a mix of found footage and traditional filming to make a semi-mockumentary to tell a unique alien story mostly set several years after initial contact. The mid-budget film garnered both financial success and critical acclaim, ending its theatrical run with $200 million at the box office and 5 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture.
Your second prescription is Steven Spielberg's 1977 released sci-fi blockbuster Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Spielberg's first story of extraterrestrials coming to Earth uses a slow and artistic approach to talk about the initial contact. They used every trick in the book, from sets to models, matte paintings, and water tanks, to pull off this incredibly grand film. Among others, it stars Richard Dreyfuss, Terry Garr, and French New Wave director François Truffaut.
If you don't want to be spoiled for either of these films, make sure to watch them by the next episode 2 weeks from now.
I'm George.
I'm Devyn.
And this was your Medicinema.